All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the absolute biggest mysteries in all of science and philosophy. It's a question about the very nature of, well, you. And it all starts with a question that sounds incredibly simple, right up until the moment you actually try to answer it.
Now, really think about that for a second. You're not just a biological computer processing data. You actually experience things. You see the vibrant red of a sunset, you taste the bitterness of coffee, you feel that warmth of joy. It's like there's this movie constantly playing in your head, and you've got the starring role. But why? Why isn't it all just dark and empty inside?
And look, this isn't just some random late-night thought. This is what the philosopher David Chalmers famously called the hard problem of consciousness. It's the ultimate puzzle. How does a bunch of wet, squishy stuff in our skulls, neurons firing back and forth, somehow create this rich, subjective, technicolor world that we're all living in? Now you might be thinking, okay, this is some heady philosophy stuff. But here is where it gets really interesting. Decades before philosophers even gave this problem a name, the people who were inventing modern physics slammed headfirst into the very same wall. They discovered this strange, completely inescapable link between our minds and the nature of reality itself.
Just listen to this from Max Planck. We're talking about the father of quantum theory here. Think about what he's saying. He's not saying that your brain makes consciousness. He's flipping the whole thing on its head. He's saying consciousness is the fundamental fabric of reality, and matter is something that comes from it. And if our minds exist within consciousness, well, then we can never get outside of it to get a good, clean look. It's like a fish trying to study water.
And if you thought that was a mind-bender, it gets even wilder with another quantum giant, Erwin Schrödinger. He suggested that all our individual minds, yours, mine, everyone's, they aren't really separate things at all. We're more like different facets of one single universal consciousness. So if he's right, our personal point of view is, by its very definition, just a tiny little sliver of the whole picture.
And then another Nobel laureate, Wolfgang Pauli, pushes it even further. He asks, what if reality isn't physical or mental? What if those are just labels our limited minds have invented to try and sort things out? He's suggesting that maybe the problem isn't out there in the universe, but in here, with the limited tools we're using to look at it.
So the takeaway from the founders of modern physics is, frankly, pretty unsettling. The mind is not a passive camera just taking pictures of the universe. Not even close. It's an active participant, fundamentally entangled with the very reality it's observing. It's already part of the system it's trying to measure.
So if physics tells us our minds are tangled up with reality, what does biology tell us about the mind itself? Well, many modern thinkers argue that this limitation we're bumping up against isn't some kind of a bug. It's a feature, and it's hardwired right into our DNA.
To really get this, let's go back to that key distinction from David Chalmers. He talked about the easy problems. Now, easy is in quotes because they're still incredibly hard, but they're things we can solve. Like, how does the brain process information? How does it recall a memory? Science is great at the how. But then there's the hard problem. It can tell us which neurons fire when you see red, but it can't get anywhere near explaining why you have the experience of redness at all.
This has led to a whole school of thought called Mysterianism. And the idea is actually pretty straightforward. Our human minds might just be biologically unequipped to solve certain puzzles. In the same way that a dog, no matter how clever it is just never going to understand calculus. It's not magic, it's just beyond its cognitive toolkit.
In fact, the famous linguist Noam Chomsky says we shouldn't even call it a mystery. He thinks it's just basic biology. We accept that our arms have limits, our eyes have limits, so why would we ever assume our brains are unlimited? For him, it's not Mysterianism, it's a truism. It's just obvious.
And the philosopher Colin McGinn really puts the final nail in the coffin of our intellectual ego here. He reminds us of what the brain actually is. It's a survival organ. It evolved to do practical stuff. Find berries, avoid tigers, reproduce. It absolutely did not evolve to contemplate the fundamental nature of being. We're basically bringing the wrong tool for the job.
So what happens when we put it all together? When we combine this deep entanglement from physics with the hardwired limits of our biology? All the clues start pointing to one single, pretty stunning conclusion. Our minds have a built-in blind spot. It comes down to a very simple, almost logical paradox. A tool can't measure itself. An eyeball can't see itself. A flashlight can't shine a light on its own batteries. So if the mind is the ultimate tool, the thing we use to see and understand everything else, how could it possibly turn around and see the very source that it's springing from?
And just when you think you're wrapping your head around that, cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman comes along and just flips the entire script. See, we've always assumed that brains and neurons create consciousness, but he asks a devastating question. What if it's the other way around? What if neurons are just symbols that consciousness itself creates to interact with the world? If a neuron only exists when it is perceived, how could it possibly be the source of the perceiver?
So here's the chain of reasoning we've built. Our minds evolved for survival, not for seeing objective truth. To do that, they create a super simplified user interface of reality. Now, what if consciousness is part of the fundamental operating system of that reality? If that's true, then our thinking mind is just an icon on the desktop. It is simply an insufficient instrument to grasp its own source. It's like trying to measure the internet with a ruler.
Now listen, this isn't a statement of failure. This is an admission of a boundary. And just like any known boundary on an old map, it points to a vast unknown frontier that lies just beyond what we can currently chart. A frontier that might even lie beyond thought itself.
So the one thing your mind can never truly know might just be its own origin. But acknowledging this limit doesn't end the journey of discovery. In fact, it opens up a brand new one. It forces us to ask a much bigger, much more interesting question. If our thinking mind has a boundary, what lies on the other side?